Good morning, church family. We ready to go? All right. I don't know if you've noticed, but Easter is upon us. Easter is just a few weeks away. And if you're new to church, Easter's kind of like the Super Bowl for church life. It's the biggest time every year we gather together to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And here's a suggestion, a thought that I'd like to lay before you here this morning. That each one of us has someone that we can invite this year. Each one can reach one. You like that? All right. So there's these invitation cards for Easter at Grace. Our graphics creative team did a great job designing these. If I designed it, it would be like something written on a 3x5 card. And so this is really, really good. Here's the thing. This is something that could be possible. Here it is. That each one of us, especially if we've been in church for a while, this is kind of maybe a regular flow of our life, is something that we do. A lot of times we get into the flow of just going and doing it, and we just go on autopilot. But what if this year, more than any other time, more than any other point in our walk with Christ, if we develop a list? That can be just a pad and pen. Students, a pad is something called paper. It's made from trees, and you get something called a pen and you write on it, right? Okay, so whether you want to go just regular 3x5 card, one of those little notebooks, or whether you want to whip out your iPhone and keep a note, all of us know somebody. You're like, well, I don't know my neighbors. Here's your chance. All right? So all of us know somebody, and for some of us, this could be a great opportunity, not just to invite them, but to create some great relationships and connections with those that we live around. So here's the idea, that every single one of us will invite at least one person. Like not just, hey, Easter, see you later, but like actually invite them, invest in them, to invite them to come on Easter to hear the gospel presented about how Jesus can change our lives. And here's what could happen if they come. Hear the gospel, and then the very next week we're going to start a brand new sermon series called Family Goals. Family Goals. And each one of us, each one of our families has to some level something called dysfunction. All right, well, I'm not the cause of the dysfunction in my family. There it is, right there, right? That's the evidence right there. So here's the thing. What we want to do is leverage in a strategic way the biggest Christian event all year on the Christian calendar, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, to invite as many people as we can so that they'll come hear the gospel. And it could be they come back the next week. For the next 6 weeks, we will break down what God's word has to say in the area of family relationships. Husband, wife to husband, kid to mom, kid to dad, dad to children. And we'll see, Lord willing, how that begins to really make sense of life and relationships, meaning biblical Christianity, the Bible. And it could be that your invitation to someone to come for Easter could lead them to come back to see what God's plan for the family is, and marriages could literally be saved. Like the hearts of fathers could be turned towards their children, and the hearts of the children could be turned towards their fathers. There's no telling what could happen if this year, more than any other year, more than any other point, we say, God, I'm going to ask you for some names. You give me those names, and I'm going to invite for Easter, and let's see what God does this year. There could be some incredibly exciting things happen for Easter, but that's if we can do that, amen, together. As a faith family, as a church family, we all know people. And let's just have that spirit of excitement to say, Lord, I think you can do something special this year. Whether it's handing them an invite card or a Facebook invite video, whatever the Lord leads you to do, we believe that God can do something great this Easter. Do you believe that, church family? All right. Let's jump into John chapter 18. John chapter 18. And this morning we're going to look at a very interesting figure. In fact, this is actually interesting, but the figure of Pilate, a Roman governor named Pilate, the story is crazy. So this this morning, we'll talk about basically part one of the story of Pilate, and I hope that you come back next week because we're going to talk about Jesus, Pilate, and a guy named Barabbas that was, an OG murderer. He was a robber. He was an insurrectionist. This guy was bad news bears. So we're going to introduce Pilate, and what he does with Jesus and Barabbas is something truly, truly unforgettable. Whether you've been in the Bible for a while or whether you're new to church, there are several ways that we can all identify with Pilate. The first would be that all of us are under authority. All of us have to report to someone somewhere. Even if you're the president of your corporation or the owner of your business, you're really dependent upon your customers, right? Like all of us have someone to report to. Secondly, all of us have to deal to some degree with hard-to-please people. Can I see your hand if you ever interact with hard-to-please people? And someone like, well, Jeff, my hand's not up because you said hard-to-please. I deal with impossible-to-please people. When you say that, both hands will go up. Like all of us to some degree deal with people that just seem to be really hard to please. Really hard to please. For some of you, that's people that are a part of your family. Like, this is not the time that you make eye contact with them, but, like, that's just real. Like, for some, it's like I try to do everything, right? And it's just, that's the way it works. All of us have to, in some way, deal with hard or impossible to please people. Number three, all of us have stuff on our schedule. Do you remember all of the marketing back in the day? Some of us weren't there to see that, but some of us can remember or even read that when these modern appliances like washing machines came out, do you know what the advertisement was? If you buy this, you'll have more time. For real. Like if you go back and Google a lot of that, the way it was advertised and promoted, and the way that a lot of these modern contrivances, these modern machines were sold as there's going to be a point in the future that the more stuff we invent to help us with stuff like your clothes, you just pour some liquid into a machine and throw your clothes in and push a button and voila, it washes your clothes. Imagine how much time you could reclaim if you don't have to hand wash your clothes. Mind's blown. People years ago said there's going to be a point to where we're going to have so much time that we're going to be able to invent even greater things because we'll have all of this time. And there's going to be a point to where mankind will be able to fix mankind's issues because of all the time that we'll have. Anybody have a lot of time that you don't know what to do with? I don't know anybody that way today. We have more help, we have more assistance, we have more machines, but it seems like we have less time today than we ever did in the history of what we could even remember as something called life. When we look at the story of Pilate, we find this guy whose schedule was so incredibly full, and it was full of things that we could understand as pressure, as insane levels of stress. I know many of you work jobs to where it is, you pray before you go in, you pray throughout the day, you pray when you come home. It's just the nature of the beast. And many professions are that way, especially today, that it seems like you go to work, and when you leave work, it feels like the marrow of your bones has been extracted. Like you're not tired, you're like not even exhausted, you're just like done. And we feel the pressure and the stress today. Pilate lived in a life like that. And what we'll see this morning is how we can relate to Pilate. One last point of reference here for our men in the room. We as men can be stubborn. Okay, I know you ladies don't believe that, but it's true. God had given Pilate's wife a level of insight about who Jesus really was. She told Pilate, have nothing to do with this righteous man. He's innocent, he's righteous, he's unique, he's something else. And Pilate ignored his wife's counsel. We don't have time to get into this, but we will into our family series after Easter. But gentlemen, all throughout Scripture at different points, it seems that God has given are ladies' insights, at least examples in the Bible, that he didn't give to the men. We would do well to listen to the counsel and the ideas of our wife. Okay, I was waiting. The other two services, we had ladies standing up, preach, preach, you know. What? But gentlemen, we can save ourselves a lot of hurt and pain and a lot less catastrophic damage to those around us if we would heed and take counsel with the wife that God has given us. Pilate didn't do that. And this week and next week, we'll see in a way what that eventually led to. Pilate was brought, as we will see. This is one of those stories, guys, to where we see Pilate brought so close, this character, this real historical person who lived, brought so close to the face of truth, but it's just like you're so close, but you're so far away. That this morning, there may be some of us that normally react with, clapping of hands or laughter or a head nod, that there's some points of this story that are so profound and they go so deep into our souls that we can't do anything but just sit there and say, God, give me the strength that I need to go the other way than where Pilate went. So Pilate's question that we'll get to about halfway through our message this morning is one of the most profound questions that we could ever ask. It's like sometimes if you've been in a classroom and the professor or the teacher will say there are no dumb questions, and then someone asks a question and everybody else in the class is scratching their head saying, well, I think we just found one, right? Like there's some questions that we've all asked at some point or another, or there's some of us that have questions that we would ask on the job, but we don't want to ask it because we are like, I should already know that. And everybody's going to say, where have you been? All that, right? And we don't want to look dumb. But there are some questions, now, on the other end that are so sharp, that are so smart, that even just the question itself has the chance to change people's lives for the better, to literally transform a person's life. And that's where we find Pilate's question. But as we begin this story in verse 28, the first thing that we're confronted with is a crazy amount of irony. There is so much irony. Look at verse 28. Then they, these are Jesus' accusers, then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. Okay, now right here, do you see something that's a little bit curious? They're wanting to execute a man who everybody knows is innocent. Like everybody knows, like Jesus was not guilty of tax fraud. Jesus had not done a drive-by. Jesus was not guilty of libel or slander. Jesus is like doing the best job of being alive that anyone has ever come close to doing. Like you heard Breaking Bad, like Jesus is breaking awesome. Like every category of, wow, that's good, I should do that, I need that in my life, I should think that, I should say that, I should hold back where Jesus held back. Like he's killing it on every single level. It's like everybody knows this dude is innocent. But they want him murdered because when you read the Gospels, you find that the religious leaders, this is crazy territory. They knew that all the miracles, like not tricks, but actual miracles that Jesus was doing, those were evidence that Jesus was the Son of God. Like no doubt. They knew that. But they didn't want to let go of control. They would rather have a part in putting to death the son of the owner than give over control to the owner who actually knows best anyway. And we'll talk about that more, how dense and dull our own pride and my pride makes me. So they didn't want to go into the house. Did you catch that? Because they didn't want to be defiled. This is the irony of hypocrisy. It's like, bro, you're already defiled. Like, it's one thing having the urge to take someone's life, but when you know good and well, not only have they not done anything bad, deserving of death, they've done like incredibly awesome stuff, and you want to kill them? But no, I don't want to enter into the Gentile house because I don't want to be defiled. Whoa, time out, bro. You are defiled. The irony of hypocrisy. And then there's the irony in verse 29 and 30 of a pagan, which that word means far from God. It's a person who's far from God, Roman, demanding truth and God's people ignoring it. So Pilate, verse 29, went outside of them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" Notice his move to hear the evidence. They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Whoa. All right, did you see that move? He said, "Where's the evidence?" And they're like, "Well, we wouldn't have brought him before you if there wasn't any evidence." He's like, "No, that's not the question. Where's the evidence?" "Well, obviously there's evidence, because if there wasn't evidence, we'd be here." Time out. Where's the evidence? "Well, obviously." No. Where is it? And next week we'll look at how they falsely accused Jesus and how that was put in contrast with a fascinating character called Barabbas. But there's the irony in Luke chapter 23, verses 22 and 23. Here's the irony of a pagan, far from God Roman who, check this, is defending Jesus 3 times. Versus last week, Jesus' lead disciple denying Jesus 3 times. Notice what the text says. A third time he said to them, Pilate saying to the accusers, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving of death." This is a point in the story to where I just, reading it, it's just like sitting at my desk. I kind of throw up my hands. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Now, if you've walked through the Bible, you know the story of Jesus and the resurrection, the passion. You know Pilate's in the category of the bad guys who made a really bad choice. But before he finally pushed the button, Pilate is defending Jesus at the potential cost of his political career. Like if Pilate was simply a guy who says, "I don't care about justice, I don't care about anything, I just care about me, kill him, kill her, doesn't matter," he would not have continued to go back and forth. But 3 times he stood up for Jesus when God's people were trying to kill God's son. And Pilate knew that the motivation was envy and not justice. Pilate's wife, as we said previously, warned him that Jesus was innocent. Gentlemen, we should listen to our wife. Listen to your wife. It's often our ladies have an ability to have an insight, an angle, a sense that we often don't have. Pilate was also willing to release a hardened criminal, as we'll see next week, in order to save Jesus. But in verse 31 and 32, we see that God is sovereign over injustice. Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." So Pilate's trying to pass the buck, right? The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." So what they did is throw it right back at Pilate. And they say, "Let's remind you who actually wears the pants as far as executions. You guys do, not us. We're subject to you." This was, notice the sovereignty of God here. Verse 32, this was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So then it goes inside the headquarters, and Pilate, verse 33, entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you king of the Jews?" So this is Jesus and Pilate. And wouldn't it have been incredible to be there and see this exchange? Notice Jesus is in the house, but Jesus is not unclean. Jesus answered, this is a 100-mile-an-hour fastball right here. "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Oh, snap. Like, think about it from Pilate's perspective. Like, in his mind, he's the guy. Like he's the boss, el patron. Like he's got the guy to be able to give life or death. And then he gets this type of response from Jesus. And what Jesus is doing here is so brilliant because it's really like today. Someone will ask you a question and you have this sense there's something deeper than the question. You ever been there? Somebody's like, so what you're saying, if I understand your point, is, and you're like, whoa, there's the question. And then there's all that stuff underneath the question. There's like the plant that's a couple of inches above the ground, and there's like this vast ecosystem of roots. What Jesus is doing is he's going to Pilate saying, there's the question, but the question is actually a shadow of the real issue. And Pilate says in verse 35, you can notice the frustration that he has. He said, am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priest have delivered you over to me. What have you done? Almost sounds like a parent, right? If you're a parent, you have kids and everything gets quiet, you go find them and say, okay, what have you done? He's saying, obviously there's people, your own people are brought you to me. Like, I'm not a Jew, but you're a Jew and you're in hot water with other Jewish people. Like, what did you do? And Jesus answered him. Here's where it gets incredibly profound. Jesus answered verse 36, my kingdom is not of this world. So what does Jesus have? You can bet your last dollar Jesus has a kingdom. My kingdom, ownership, is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting. Jesus is like, you think that my kingdom is like yours? If my kingdom was like yours, my servants would actually be soldiers. And you bet we would have been setting up some roadblocks and some ambushes. Like not just this night, not last night, but we would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world. Jesus is telling Pilate there's something different here. And then Pilate, staying on course, verse 37, said to him, so are you a king? And Jesus answered, here's where it begins to be, fastball city. You say that I am a king. Imagine the courage to do that. Imagine you're Pilate and you may not yet be convinced that there's anything special about Jesus, but slowly but surely you're like, this guy's putting down truth. Like he's got no ability from what I can see to get out of this. I've got his life in my hand, but slowly but surely Pilate begins to realize that it's not Jesus on trial. We okay in the house? It's everybody else on trial. You say that I am a king, verse 37. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. And that this is to Pilate. Everyone who is of the truth listens to the voice of Rome. Nope. Notice the boss level ownership listens to my voice. I can't say that. None of us could say, well, if you're of the truth, you'll just listen to whatever I tell you to do. Oh, that's called a cult leader. I'm not going there. We're not going there. Amen? But here is truth in the flesh. Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. And he's saying, if you care about truth, then you'll listen to the one who is truth. And then we come to a profound question for every person who has ever thought a thought. At this point, you don't have to be a Christian to appreciate the gravity of what's being laid down here. Pilate says, verse 38, to him, what is truth? Here's the mystery. We don't know how Pilate said it. We don't know if he said, what is truth? We don't know if he said, what is truth? We don't know. But here is what we do know, that he immediately left before Jesus answered. And he went before the crowd and says, I find no guilt in him. Pilate was swayed by the opinions of other people as opposed to being swayed by truth itself. And so Pilate's question, what is truth, is one of the most important questions that we could ever ask. Today, we all want truth, whether we say we believe in truth or not. For some of us, we'll go search for truth by talking to friends or doing a search online for blogs or on Wikipedia or Google or YouTube. And you will probably not find truth in YouTube comments, but I'm just saying. We need somewhere to go that's like the North Star, that it doesn't change, somewhere that's fixed, something that's immovable. Because here's where some of us go. And this can be a good thing, but it's a dangerous thing. Some of us, the only place we go when we need truth is the people that we call our friends. All right, time out. Praise God for real friends. Like not fair weather friends, not fake friends, like the real deal friends. But if when you go to your friends, all they ever give you is, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they said that. You're obviously right and they're all wrong. Can we say this? They may not really be your friends. Proverbs says, remember the Dumb and Dumber series over the summer? Proverbs tells us that the wounds of a friend are faithful, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Let that sink in. If someone's truly our friend, when we're wrong, they're going to be like, hey, bro, I know you're frustrated at what they did, but what you did, what were you thinking? That's a friend. A true friend is going to be able to say, you know what, I know she said that, but you tell me what you said, that would make anybody respond that way. You were the match that lit the powder keg. I love you. That's a friend. But even the friends that we have that will give us truth, that truth has to come. It has to have a reference point from without us. Because when we look within, we don't find all of the answers for truth. And here's a question that many people today ask about truth. We call the 21st century question. Here's just for a few moments, let's put on our thinking caps and jump into the deep end as we investigate the nature of truth. Here's the questions. Why is truth even important, and why does it matter? Here's how Sean McDowell responds to that question. He says, do you want the true answer or the false answer? I think that's sinking in. It's wafting over a few aspects of our room here this morning. Did you catch that? Sometimes we say, man, there are so many people that can do so many things. They can come across the wrong way. They can be corrupt and full of it. Why is truth even important? The fact that we would ask the question assumes that we want the truth, because we all live as if truth matters. We've all heard of something called fake news. We okay? Here's the thing. Whatever you believe about whatever issue, thinking people can agree on, if it is news about an event, the news should accurately report whatever event it's reporting, right? Because we all desire truth. Think about it like this. Some have told us, we've all heard this before, that there is no truth, right? You heard that before? If you've heard that, think about it this way. If there is no truth, how can I know that that statement is true? All right, so for the next couple of minutes, we're going to go into an exercise that you don't have to be a Christian to be involved in. This will show that we believe that God has given us reason and to understand that there is something such as truth. The statement, language cannot have meaning. This statement cannot have meaning since it relies on language. Truth cannot be known. Well, if so, then this truth cannot be known. I think I heard one. Okay, I hope there's more. You guys heard the statement, the claim, what's true for you isn't true for me? If so, then this claim is only true for the one who makes it and not true for anyone else. People tell us it's wrong to judge others. But this statement judges people who judge others. The scientific method is the only means of knowing truth. The problem is that that statement cannot be known through the scientific method. History is unknowable. If that's true, then this very statement would be unknowable, because by the time you read the statement and get to the last word, the first two words are already history. And one of our favorites, the claim, I don't believe in anything. That means that the speaker believes that he doesn't believe. These are examples of what's called self-defeating statements. Regardless of what we say, we all understand that truth matters and that truth is objectively true. Some people will say, well, morality, wrong and right, is dependent upon the individual or the culture. It's not objectively wrong for this or that. Well, if you walk away with the person's cell phone or laptop and say, well, I'm glad that you don't think it's objectively wrong, so my truth right now will be, wow, that's a new iPhone or that's a new computer. Thank you for that. That's my truth to walk away. They may become a believer in objective truth very, very quickly. Truth, in your notes, is what corresponds to or matches reality. It's what is firm. It's what's unmoving. And truth makes freedom and flourishing possible. Here's something that we all have. All of us have weaknesses. All of us have sin. All of us have fear. All of us have brokenness. We don't like to admit that, but every single one of us has something within that, even though we have reason, the ability to make the right decisions or to know the right decisions, sometimes we don't always do that. And here's one example. When we get into arguments, have you ever thought about the irrationality and the craziness of why it's so hard for most of us to admit that we're wrong? Like if you've got a half hour, just think about that. Just sit in any traffic light and it'll take you about that long in Palm Beach County, right? It's one of those thoughts that you're like, I'm hearing something, what is that? And people are honking their horns at you because you just missed the next green light. It's one of those thoughts that when you think about philosophically, intellectually, rationally about what it means to exist as a person in relation to our family unit and our community and our neighborhood, our society, our nation, and the world, why is it so hard for us to admit that we're wrong when we know it? Think about it from the other perspective. Here's where it gets really fun. How do you describe that feeling when you're in that heated you see, Jeff, we don't have arguments, we have discussions. Okay. In your discussion, all right? Work, school, whatever. And the other person finally comes around to saying, you know what? I can't. I'm wrong. I've been wrong. You're right. I didn't see it at first, but now I realize that you've been right the whole time. You talk about a little morsel that goes down into the soul that kind of makes you feel, I feel good, right? Like it's one of those times where we don't like to express that, but it makes you feel, not like in a good sense, but it makes you feel momentarily satisfied to, in a sense, say, that's right, I'm right. And to follow it up with a snappy one-liner, why is it so enjoyable, not to get to the truth, but that other people will realize that we had the better idea? Why is that so intoxicating? And why is it so absolutely painstakingly difficult in a conversation if we're purely rational beings, if all that matters is truth, all that matters is reason, we just want the most flourishing idea to take hold in our home? Why is it that we continue to fight for hours or days on end? I see that in my life. Like, Jeff, this makes no sense. Bro, admit you're wrong. But I don't want to. Anybody in here identify with your pastor? Okay, thank you, bro. Appreciate you. The only hand raised in the room. Love you. We'll talk afterwards. All right. There's always one, right? Each one can reach one. We're here for each other. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. But if we could take a step back, and again, you don't have to be a Christian to walk down this road to see that it's irrational to take so long to admit when we're wrong. But when we do that, that's how properly responding to truth sets the stage for us flourishing as people. To where we don't have to be in our pity parties and our arguments all the time. If we didn't have a sin nature, it would probably be a lot easier to say, okay, let's find the best idea, and the best idea wins. You're right, I'm wrong. And just find it and go on and have a good time, have a good vacation, have a good meal, have a good lunch. Like Saturday or Sunday morning, like I've been told by a number of people, when you get up for church in the morning, sometimes you can have the worst fights getting ready for church. Why is that? We have something within that, even though we can know to ask the right questions and we can even know the answer, there's something called pride that is a roadblock to properly responding to truth. And the Bible tells us that God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's why Jesus came, to destroy the works of the devil, to tear down the stronghold of pride in Jeff Robinson's heart, and to rip down those roadblocks so that truth can come into our lives. And when we properly respond to truth, our families and our lives can be changed because now we're right with God. Remember, after Pilate asked that question, he walked back outside before he gave Jesus a chance to answer. And you know what he said? That I find no fault in him. I find no guilt in him. Man, if you understand, ladies and men, students, that we all have brokenness in our lives, some of us because of things that we've done that we're really ashamed over, and for some of us, we're really ashamed because of things that we've seen done to other people or something that someone's done to us. We all have guilt. We all have shame. When we look at other people, when we get to know other people more, guess what we find? More flaws. Yes, through that God can help the friendship or the marriage, but when you get to know other people, you see that there's flaws. There's problems. But isn't it so amazing that Pilate looked at Jesus and he saw no guilt in him? If you've been discouraged, if you've been down because of the flaws, the issues in your life, or seeing that in other people, or maybe you're like, man, Jeff, this is the first time I've come to church in a long time. I'm just burned out by, organized institutional religion. I just don't feel like that's for me. Listen, when we see other people, when we interact with, we live with other people, we see flaws. But the point of all of this, the point of this church and every church is not to get us to look at each other, but to look at Jesus. And if we can look at Jesus, if this whole thing, Sunday worship services, missions, a ministry, all of that, they can get us to look to Jesus, and we can see, man, in him, he has no fault. He has no guilt. He has no flaws. But I can bring all of my flaws to him, and he knows, and he still opens the door and says, come on in. Come on in, child. Come on in, son, daughter. Let me take you in my arms. Let me heal you. Let me help you. Then it means that we can live. Come on. We're way over time, but I don't even care. It means that even though we are in the midst of families, relationships, schools, business, communities, neighborhoods, where we look around and sometimes we just shake our head at all these messed up people. What does Jesus see when he sees all of me? He came so that I might be forgiven and go free by giving his life for me. So that when I am hurt, when I'm discouraged by the flaws in my own life and by the lives of those other people that God has placed in mine, I can go to the one who has no flaws. So he can send me back out as a messenger of grace in a world of messed up people. Because in order to help other people with their issues, we got to understand that we're not all that in a bag of chips. And that's where the gospel of Jesus Christ brings all of us. Money, fame, skill set brings all of us to our knees. It says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But the beauty in that brokenness, the beauty in that is God is able to give us a heart that loves other people because we realize that we need what only Jesus can give. And may it be that when we are down, to look to the one who has no fault in him.